Welcome, everyone. This is your friend, the DN What If, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of What If Deku Became an Eldritch Hero? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. Inko Midoriya sat on a table that was in what appeared to be a magic circle. The circle was in a church. Actually, a former church. It was now more of a collection of rubble and debris than a place of worship. Inko was not clear on what it had been a church to. The cultists currently unconscious around her never told her what gods they worshipped. They did not tell her much as they were mostly focused on trying to sacrifice her. Inko would normally not disparage anyone by calling them a cultist, but given their dark robes, the statues covered in tentacles, and the fact they kidnapped her in order to fuel an Eldritch ritual, made it hard for Inko to think of them as anything but cultists. Plus, from the zealous way they chanted impossible syllables and how they referred to the one in the fancy robes as All Highest, Inko got a distinct impression that they would be offended if she did not call them cultists. Since none of them took the time to talk with her, she could not know for certain. Roughly 56 seconds ago, they were not unconscious. They were very conscious and trying to sacrifice her. As far as ceremonial blood sacrifices went, they were doing a very fine job. They had nice robes, clean daggers, and never once stumbled in the pronunciation of the alien words man was not meant to know they chanted to their eldritch gods. Inko appreciated that she had been abducted by professional cultists this time. The hero was also very professional. He broke down the door, along with most of the front wall, with a single blow. With a bright, shining smile, the hero challenged the cultists with a witty one-liner. In the ensuing fight, the hero knocked out each cultist with a flurry of punches. He was even considerate enough to break the ropes holding Inko down before the battle was done. Within seconds of arriving, only that All Highest person was still standing. The cultist had summoned a 30-foot-tall monstrosity to clash with the champion of justice. The two were still fighting. As she watched the battle, Inko wondered what the cultists were trying to do with the ritual. They only were able to cut her once before that hero interrupted them. There was a sound. Something almost like a baby babbling or a badly tuned violin playing a lullaby that caught Inko's attention. She looked for the source. There was a basket with a cloth bundle placed below her such that the blood from her cut had dripped into it. An eye peered up at her. Inko thought for a moment. Earlier, when the cultists tried to sacrifice her, she had seen this basket, which definitely did not have anything like that in it. Curious. Getting down from the table, she knelt before the basket. The eye followed her. Moving some of the cloth aside, she revealed the creature's body of writhing tentacles. Carefully, with both hands, Inko picked the creature up. Inko held the mass of tendrils before her. She stared. The thing stared back at her. The thing did not smile at her. It had no mouth to smile at her. Despite that, Inko got the distinct impression that the thing smiled at her. Inko smiled in return. "Hello," she said to the abomination. It blinked and continued to smile without smiling at her. Inko made a funny face. The thing made a sound that could have been laughter or thousands of mirrors shattering miles away. She looked over to where All Highest appeared to be throwing a fit as the hero was literally tying the monster into knots. The hero seemed to have everything well in hand. Inko turned away from the fight. Holding the thing close to her chest, Inko began to walk away. "I think I'll call you Izuku." Years later, for lack of a better term, boy stood before the doors of the prestigious UA high school. He looked wrong. Tokoyami Fumikage, a guy that did not look very normal himself, noticed that about him right away, but could not quite figure out why. The reason Tokoyami looked odd was simple. He had a very bird-like head. The other boy did not have an oddity quite so apparent. It was something about the color of the boy's skin, or how his body gave the impression it was out of scale. Maybe it was the faint lines across his face which somehow looked more like seams than scars. Finally, while it might have just been a trick of the light, every few seconds it looked almost like something moved under his skin. Fumikage was about to shrug it off to continue into the building when a blonde boy walked straight into the strange boy. The blonde boy smacked the strange boy in the back of his head. "Out of the way, worm," he said. Walking past the strange kid, the blonde paused before turning back and adding, "And remember doors this time." The strange boy blinked once, before smiling, revealing an unsettling number of teeth. "Thanks, Katsuki." The blonde just continued walking into the building. The strange boy nodded and followed the crowd into the building. Fumikage did not know what to make of that. Izuku Midoriya took his seat next to Bakugo in the UA lecture hall. When Present Mic appeared on stage, Midoriya gasped in excitement and started mumbling facts about the pro hero. Bakugo sighed and picked up the page in front of him. Present Mic explained the 3 kinds of robots that the students would be facing in the test. After a little while, a student stood up and asked about the 4th robot listed on the printout. He then turned to Midoriya and said in a harsh tone, "In addition, you with the unkempt hair." Midoriya continued mumbling. Bakugo, without looking away from the printout, raised his hand up and smacked the back of the muttering boy's head. Midoriya kept mumbling. He did not even move. Bakugo raised his hand again, placing it behind Midoriya's head. The air between Bakugo's hand and Midoriya's head exploded. Midoriya stopped mumbling. He turned to Bakugo. Bakugo, still not looking up from the printout, pointed to the student addressing Midoriya. Midoriya smiled and said, "Thanks, Katsuki," before turning expectantly to the other student. The tall boy paused before saying in a much more subdued tone, "Can you please stop muttering? It's distracting everyone." "I'm sorry," Midoriya said. "Student number 2233, it is not hip to use your quirk on another student." Present Mic shouted. Finally looking up from the printout, Bakugo replied, "If you got a better way to get the worm's attention, I would love to hear it." Midoriya waved his hands placatingly at the teacher. "It's okay, Bakugo was just helping. It's not like he attacked me or anything." Present Mic gave Midoriya a skeptical look. Silently he decided to just move on. If either of them failed to make it in, a likely result considering the number of students taking the test, then this would not be UA's problem. Present Mic continued to explain the rules. The pink-skinned acid-using girl Mina Ishido felt uncharacteristically nervous. That muttering boy from the introduction had been assigned to the same testing area she had been. She could not help but keep an eye on him, and she knew she was not the only one. The boy had left an impression. Even if he tried to keep his head down, everyone could tell when he got on the bus, as the whole thing tilted under his weight. While Ishido was not an expert on explosions, she was sitting several rows away from him and could feel it when the other boy snapped the mutterer back to reality. If that is what it took to even get this guy's attention, who knew what it would take to actually hurt him? The bus rocked again when he got off. Being that heavy meant just walking proved he was extremely strong as well. It was a sobering reminder that UA only accepted the very best. Ishido knew her quirk was good, but she was not entirely sure it was good enough. The huge testing area added to that impression. Its massive gates seemed to declare that only titans are worthy of attending this place. Ishido was surrounded by a sea of other students, likely each one with powerful quirks of their own, and this was only one testing group. In total, out of the thousands of students taking the test, only 40 were going to pass. Realistically, she had no chance. She was Mina Ishido, a pink bombshell of fun, chemical burns, and romance. Her quirk was awesome. She was awesome. She was going to pass this test like a boss, and UA would not even know what hit it. Ishido looked over at the muttering boy, who was not actually muttering at that moment. He was standing alone by the wall next to the giant gates. Ishido decided she was going to go talk to him. He was probably a cool guy, who was likely just as nervous as everyone else. "Go!" Midoriya ran through the wall. Midoriya ran through the wall. He did not phase through it like a ghost. He did not stop to punch or kick a hole through it. Midoriya simply, at a rather normal pace, ran at the wall. The ground shook with every step he took. The foot of concrete between him and the testing area failed to be an obstacle. Midoriya broke through the wall with his face. The students present stared at the gaping hole and the settling concrete dust. A pink-skinned girl among them smiled. "Yeah. Breaking things." She shouted and jumped through the hole after him. Every eye in the observation room was locked on the screen covering testing area C. The odd white-furred creature Nizu, the principal of UA, took a sip of coffee and said, "It's good to see such enthusiasm in a potential student." "Who was that?" asked Snipe. "Student 2234, Midnight replied as she hit a few keys in front of her to bring the boy's file onto the big screen. The teachers looked at the information presented to them. "This has got to be a mistake," Snipe said. On the screen was a picture of the awkward-looking boy. Beside it was the words, "Izuku Midoriya. Quirk, Izuku Midoriya." "Oh yes, young Midoriya," Nizu said. "A most unique case." Cementos gave the principal a suspicious look. "What do you mean by that?" "Just that I expect that I will be looking at his progress with interest," Nizu smiled. All Might stood behind the other teachers. That name, Midoriya, sounded familiar. He just could not remember why. Izuku Midoriya's arm unraveled into thick tendrils. The tentacles stretched out and wrapped around the neck of a robot. With a squeeze and a twist, the head popped off. This test was almost tailor-made for Midoriya. A seek and destroy objective in a city where collateral damage did not matter. It played into so many of his strengths that it was unfair. The robots broke nearly the moment he touched them. Their metal frames offered little resistance to his massive strength. The concrete buildings, meant to impair the student's movement and vision, might as well not exist for Midoriya. It was just so much easier for his strange eyes to see the electricity coursing through the robots than the dull, lifeless walls. It was honestly more effort for Midoriya to determine if a robot he was looking at was behind a wall than it was to reach out and break it along with anything that happened to be in the way. On top of everything, the robots often actively moved towards him. His earth-shaking, ground-cracking footfalls triggering any nearby robot sensors. It meant, even with Midoriya's relatively slow movement, there was very little time between him destroying robots. All things considered, it was a bit of an anticlimax for the aspiring hero. Midoriya was chasing down a one-pointer that was actually running away from him, complaining about how fast the thing was when he heard the scream. Nito Monoma had screwed up. He had been doing well until this point. Before the start of the test, he was able to mingle with the other students, copying many useful quirks. He destroyed a lot of robots. Throughout the test, he was able to copy a few more quirks to keep up his momentum. Monoma felt he had done well for himself up until the end. When the zero-pointers appeared, everyone ran, Monoma included, but he stumbled. Panicking, he scrambled into a side street to try to avoid the giant robot's notice. Only after entering it did he see that the end of the street was cut off by rubble. It was a dead end. Turned. The zero-pointer had followed him. Monoma froze with fear. Monoma could not fight that thing. Even if he still had all of the quirks he copied at the start of the test, he could not have fought that thing. Every quirk he copied that would have let him escape had timed out. There was nothing he could do. Yeah. A pink-skinned girl jumped from the top of a building. With a stylish flip, liquid sprayed out of her hands. The zero-pointer turned its head to lock onto the source of the shout, only for its face to be covered with the goop. "Eat that, you overgrown toast dash." The girl's taunt was cut short. The robot had brought its arm up and swatted her out of the air. Monoma screamed as the girl was flung straight towards him. The pink girl crashed into his stomach, sending both of them to the ground. The pink girl was back on her feet in an instant. She looked up at the robot's face. 7 of its 8 red eyes had been hit with liquid. They had melted and gone dim. The final eye looked straight at the two students. The girl swore. "I missed one," she said before looking over her shoulder and asking, "Any chance you got an amazing idea?" Monoma groaned with pain as he stood up. "Yeah," the pink girl said with a pained wince of her own. She took up a fighting stance. "Thought not. Desperate last stand it is." The wall to the two's left exploded. The muttering kid stepped out of the dust. "Is something row dash?" the kid started to say before glancing over at the colossal zero-point robot. His smile revealed sharp, predatory teeth. Giving the 2 other students a thumbs up, he said, "Never mind, I see the problem." With no hesitation, he took 3 steps towards the zero-pointer. His head and arms unraveled. His shirt ripped apart. Tentacles lined with jagged, misshapen teeth rose into the air, forming a giant maw. The monstrosity engulfed the robot. Crunch. The tentacles withdrew. The monster shrank. In moments it was once again just a boy. A boy without a shirt, but still a boy. The top third of the robot was gone. It shook with the now pointless whir of motors. A brief fountain of oil burst from the broken machine, covering everything around it. The remains of the robot collapsed. The monster boy, covered in the machine's oil, turned back to the two other students. He smiled. "Is there anything else I can do for you?" "That was the coolest," the pink girl said, gaping. "Most terrifying thing I have ever seen." "Thank you," replied the boy. As the boy approached, both of the others started to lean back. The buzzer indicating the end of the test finally rang out. All three kids slumped, tension leaving their bodies. The girl stopped. With an effort of will, her eyes hardened. She stepped forward and grabbed one of the boy's hands in both of hers in an exuberant handshake. "I'm Mina Ishido, and really, thanks. That tentacle thing you did was super cool." The boy hesitated. "Good." He paused again before continuing. "Hello, I am Izuku Midoriya." Snapping out of his stupor, Minoma rallied. "Yes, thank you," he said, before slicking back his ruffled hair. "Of course it was really unnecessary. I had everything under control." "Oh, I thought I heard a scream," Midoriya said. He glanced back at, or maybe beyond, the hole in the wall he had made to get to them, obviously thinking he should have continued hunting for points. Ishido's eyes darted over to Minoma, and the barest hint of a smirk flickered across her face. "Sorry, that was me," Ishido said apologetically. "I guess I got a bit overwhelmed." "Still, thank you." Minoma coughed. "Anyway, I'm Nito Minoma," he said. Ishido had let go of Midoriya's hand. Minoma supposed it would only be polite to shake it. In his mind, there was a flash of tentacles and teeth. Powerful as it obviously was, he did not want to copy that quirk. Minoma took Midoriya's hand, ready to suppress his own copying quirk. Nothing. A less notable but still very useful part of Minoma's quirk was that it could give him a good impression of how other quirks worked. When he touched Midoriya, he expected to feel that terrifying monstrous form. Instead, it seemed like there was nothing there. Except, it did not feel quite like touching someone without a quirk. It was more like nothing extraordinary was there. It just felt normal. Something in the wreck of the zero-pointer sparked. The oil that leaked out of the massive machine caught fire. Minoma and Ishido jumped back. Midoriya blinked and asked, "Am I on fire?" Ishido replied, "Yes." Midoriya nodded. "I am on fire," he said firmly, seemingly more as a confirmation to himself than anything else. The staff of UA in the observation chamber looked at a still screen displaying Midoriya's massive form biting the head off of the zero-pointer. "Well, that is," Midnight began to say before trailing off. "Horrifying," suggested Snipe. "Intriguing," said Cementos. "Interesting," finished Midnight. "I'm sure we'll come to some consensus on that point within the next few years," said Nizu. "After all, I believe young Midoriya scored more than enough points to secure his place here." "We aren't seriously going to accept him, are we?" Snipe said. "You all saw what that kid became." "Quirks are not always pretty," Cementos said sternly. "That," Snipe replied, pointing at the screen, "is not a quirk. You don't know that." "All Might," Midnight said, cutting the two off before the argument could truly get going. "What do you think?" All Might spent a moment in silence before replying, "I don't know." He looked at another screen. It was a live feed of the testing area where the student in question was running in circles with his hands in the air shouting, "I'm on fire! I'm on fire! I'm on fire! Somebody should go put him out." Tiu Azui, a very frog-like girl, sat reading a book in the library of her mother's little home by the waterside. It was late in the evening. The rain that had been coming down all day had stopped only minutes before. The front door opened. A small mousy, middle-aged woman entered the little library. Throwing off her coat onto a rack in the corner, she practically leapt at the bookshelves. Frantically pulling out one book after another, gathering them in her arms. "Hi, Mom," Suyu said. Azui jumped and dropped a few of the books on the floor. "Hello, sweetie," she said breathlessly, clutching at her heart. "What have I told you about sneaking up on me?" "I was already sitting here," Suyu said. Her mother coughed a little in embarrassment. "Oh yes, sorry, sweetie. I guess I was a little distracted by something your father told me. Placing the books she was carrying onto a desk, Brew turned to give her daughter her full attention. How are you doing? Tsu picked up the letter on the table beside her. She held it before her, displaying the shining crest of UA. With a little, prideful smile she said, I got in. Looking dumbfounded, her mother stared at the open letter in Tsu's hands. She let loose a bark of laughter before rushing over to wrap the girl in a gigantic hug. That's wonderful, she said with pride. We have to tell your father. We have to celebrate. We need cake. Yes, Tsu said, hugging her mom with all she was worth before pulling away. Walking across the room, Tsu began to pick up the books her mother had dropped earlier. How has Dad been? Quite well. Quite well, Bruce said. Worried about you like any father should. He'll be so happy to hear you got in. Tsu bent down to pick up one of the books her mother had dropped. Some of the titles jumped out at her. Prophecies of the Sevenfold Snake, Path of the Eldest Eye, Necronomicon. Tsu looked up at her mother and asked, What did you and Dad talk about? Oh yes, well, she said, some of the cheer leaving her voice. Her eyes swept over the many books of lore and myths in their little library. Have you ever heard of the Mother of Ends? Fumikage Tokoyami had seen a monster. That tentacled thing that ate the 0-pointer in the entrance exam. Tokoyami and his quirk, Dark Shadow, knew about monsters. That was why he was poring over the various books and scrolls, kept in the library attached to the shrine his family maintained, about demons and dark spirits. Tokoyami heard a voice come from his home, Honey, it's time for dinner. Tokoyami yelled out the window, Hold on, Mom. Are you looking through those musty old books again? His mother asked. Tomes of Eldritch knowledge, Tokoyami muttered under his breath, before speaking up. Just a minute. Those books will still be there for you after dinner, his mother replied. Now hurry up and get over here. Moom, Tokoyami whined. I'll be there in a second. You should listen to your mother, Tokoyami's father said. She's getting quite impatient for you to open a certain letter that arrived today. Tokoyami bolted out the door and was in his home in a moment. He ran to the room where his mother was scolding his father for ruining the surprise. Dark Shadow, just as excited as him, snatched up the letter from UA and ripped it open. A small device clattered on the table. The little device played a message from All Might, the All Might, congratulating and welcoming him to the UA Heroics Department. Tokoyami was going to UA. Even as he and his family celebrated, a thought would not completely leave him alone. It would be more than heroes attending this year. That monster would be there as well. Tokoyami needed to be ready. Nizu stood outside a small house. It was not a traditionally dangerous neighborhood. Muggers, drug dealers, and other conventional criminals were rare, but it was a dangerous neighborhood all the same. The number of hero battles that took place in the area per year was more than 5 times that of the surrounding neighborhoods. Nizu was not surprised that Izuku Midoriya lived in such a place. The door was opened by a woman who appeared to be in her 40s. She looked much like Izuku, with a similar facial structure and hair the same shade of green. Shorter than most, she looked to be in good health. Hello, I am Nizu, the principal said, holding out his hand. May I presume that you are Ms. Inko Midoriya, mother of one Izuku Midoriya? Yes, I am, Inko said. Bending over only slightly, she shook Nizu's hand. What is your business here? I am the principal of UA High School, Nizu said. He pulled an envelope from his bag with the shining crest of UA on the front. I came here to personally give Izuku Midoriya his letter of acceptance into our heroics department. Inko's face lit up like the sun. Would you care to come in? She asked. Graciously, Nizu bowed his head. I would be delighted. Opening the door further, Inko pointed the principal to a living room with a few seats arranged around a coffee table before going to fetch her child. Sitting in a chair, Nizu spent the moment he had alone to examine his surroundings. The room was simply furnished with cheap but sturdy furniture. Everything was spotless. By Nizu's considerably accurate estimation, it could not have been more than 2 days since the room was last cleaned. It was also in good repair. Strangely good repair, Nizu thought as his experienced eyes saw the history of the room. This room had seen its fair share of conflict. Slight discolorations in the plaster walls showed numerous holes that had been patched over. Minor scratches on the floor indicated a minimum of 3 times someone had gotten into a physical altercation. The furniture was faded to different degrees, each one bought at different times to replace whatever had been most recently destroyed. Even a few well-scrubbed, but not completely invisible bloodstains were scattered across the room. Though really the most notable aspect of the room was all of the framed pictures. A number of them were the kind of pictures anyone would expect. Nizu thought he could spot at least one picture of Izuku Midoriya for every year of the boy's life from the age of 4 onwards. There were also pictures of what must have been friends of the family, such as the eye-catching one of Inko trying to take away a live chicken from a blonde woman waving a curved knife. Outnumbering those were the pictures of pro-heroes. Literally dozens of them. Most were of different heroes standing beside Inko with an arm over her shoulders. Unusually for those kinds of pictures, most of the heroes seemed a tad uneasy compared to the innocently smiling woman. It was interesting. Nizu smiled as both Midoriyas entered the room. The Izuku sat on a couch opposite the coffee table from Nizu. "Congratulations," Nizu said, passing the letter over to the boy. "Your performance for the exam was truly astounding." There was the sound of a camera shutter. Lowering her camera, Inko beamed with motherly pride. Izuku smiled as well. Their resemblance was made clearer with them both in front of him. Izuku carefully opened it and examined the contents of the letter. "I know this is quite rude of me, but if you don't mind, could you leave the room?" Nizu said. "I wish to ask student Midoriya a few questions." Some of the warmth left Inko's expression. "Why?" "I think he holds great promise," Nizu said. "I assure you, I wish to help him make the best of his time in UA." Inko nodded and once again was nothing but sweetness. "We'll be having dinner soon. Would you care to join us?" "Thank you, but no, I'm afraid I already have plans," Nizu replied, bowing his head. Inko gave Izuku a reassuring pat on the shoulder and left the room to continue cooking. A moment passed. Nizu examined Izuku. The boy was nervous. Likely due more to social anxiety than anything else. "Student Midoriya, why do you want to be a hero?" Nizu asked. "I am immensely strong and durable. My abilities would be useful in many dash." Izuku began to say a clearly practiced line of reasoning. Nizu held up a hand and Izuku stopped. "Those are fine reasons you should be a hero. Now tell me, why do you want," Nizu said, putting special emphasis on the word, "to be a hero?" Izuku was silent in thought. Nizu spoke again. "Considering everything about you, I suspect many humans have questioned your motives in the past. Please, just be honest with me." "I want to help people," Izuku said. "Being a hero is the best way for me to help people." Nizu sat back in his seat and smiled. "It is a simple reason," he said. "Simple and powerful. Many humans make grave mistakes because they think only complex things can be worthy." Another moment passed as Izuku thought about that statement. "What do you think I am? Physically, I mean?" Nizu asked. Izuku looked at the principal, truly examining him before answering, "Complicated." Nizu let out a surprised bark of laughter. "Yes," he said. "Not quite a mouse, or a dog, or a bear, and definitely not a human. Complicated is a fine description." Nizu thought for a moment before adding, "It is also a good way to describe you." Izuku shifted uncomfortably. "I have one last question for you today, student Midoriya," Nizu said, looking Izuku in the eyes. "While you attend UA, I would like to set aside some time each week for you to meet with me. Would this be acceptable?" "Why?" "I think you have great potential and will become a fine hero one day. With a good mentor, I believe that day will come much sooner," Nizu said, "and I believe myself to be a very good mentor. In addition, us complicated things should stick together." Izuku bowed his head. "Then I would be honored." "Very good, student Midoriya," Nizu said with satisfaction. "I look forward to seeing you in class." Midoriya was excited. This was UA. He was attending UA. Just like All Might, and Ryukyu, and Lunch Rush, and Ingenium, and dozens of other fine heroes who had saved his mom at some point in her life. He was going to learn to be a hero just like them. He was going to make friends, and not break everything, and act completely human. It was going to be great. There was a friend. That cheerful girl with a low pH level he met in the exams. Mina Ishido. He should go say hello. Midoriya felt a tug on his head. He stopped. Bringing his hands up, he felt around. There was something in his hair. Worm. Wall, Katsuki Bakugo said from behind him. Midoriya blinked and looked forward. Bakugo was right. There was a wall there. Midoriya gave his friend a thumbs up. With his hand in Midoriya's hair, Bakugo twisted it to the side and pushed. It was not enough to move Midoriya on its own, but it was enough to give the boy a hint. With Bakugo's hand guiding him, Midoriya walked to the door. He stopped as something caught his attention. "Why is that man laying on the ground?" he asked. "Don't care," Bakugo snapped. "Open the door." Shoto Todoroki was not merely born to be a hero. He was built to be one. This was not limited to his quirk. Todoroki lived his life on a timetable dedicated to making him the ultimate hero. Arguably, his training began even before he was born, with his mother's strict diet during the Pyarjinzuai. As soon as he learned to walk, Todoroki started learning to dodge. When other children watched cartoons, he watched battle footage. Every time he entered his home, he had to be on the lookout for whatever new subtle and devious traps his trainers had set up that day. Nearly every factor in Todoroki's life was carefully selected and calibrated for that one purpose. The one and only failing in this program was his reluctance to use his fire half. In every other respect, it had produced wonderful results. Even ignoring his overpowering quirk, Todoroki was a force to be reckoned with. He was strong, fast, and clever. His combat reflexes surpassed that of most professional heroes. Todoroki could analyze dangerous situations in a moment. He had learned how to pinpoint enemy weaknesses with a glance. When it came to action, Todoroki really was all that. All this meant that, despite his young age, Todoroki had excellent instincts. The first moment he set eyes on Izuku Midoriya, one overwhelming thought screamed through his mind: kill it with fire. Achiko Uraraka was in the middle of talking to a few of her new classmates when she felt it. A sudden, nameless dread. Something terrible was coming. Uraraka could not help but look at the door. It was like some irresistible force was pulling her gaze there. Two boys entered, and Uraraka was struck with the urge to hide under her bed. Midoriya! Ishido, one of the classmates Uraraka was talking to, shouted and ran up to the boy. Uraraka winced when the pink-skinned girl slapped the boy on the back. She did not know what she was expecting would happen. It was obviously a friendly gesture, but some instinct told her that it should have somehow ended the girl's life. The other boy rolled his eyes and walked away. Ishido grabbed Midoriya's hand and pulled him back towards the group. Instead of being dragged along or falling over, Midoriya stood there. Ishido yanked on his arm and said something Uraraka could not make out. Midoriya nodded with understanding and began to walk behind Ishido. "Guys, this is Midoriya," Ishido presented the boy to the group. "A good guy and certified wrecker of faces." Midoriya held his hand up and gave them a shy little wave. "Anyways," Ishido said, pointing to each of the little group in turn, "this is Kirishima, a real man's man. Kaminari, he seems like a chill dude. And Uraraka? No, that's wrong. You're something." Ishido looked at the brown-haired girl and asked, "Sorry, what was your name again?" Uraraka jumped. She wanted to run, hide. It was irrational and dumb. "Uraraka," she said, thankful that she did not stutter. Ishido snapped her fingers. "Right, Uraraka." Pointing at the other girl, Ishido muttered under her breath, "Uraraka, Uraraka, Uraraka," before continuing the introduction. "This is Uraraka. She is a cupcake." "Are you the guy who took out the 0-pointer?" Kirishima asked. Midoriya nodded. Kirishima nervously smiled, showing off his own pointed teeth. "Ishido told me about it. You must be a real monster." "I am human," Midoriya replied far too quickly. A moment of silence passed before, apparently not thinking this was enough, Midoriya added, "I love breathing air." "Put your feet down this instant," demanded Ida from across the room, suddenly derailing all of the other conversations. The blonde kid he was addressing sneered. Why should I for eyes? It is disrespectful, Ida said, chopping his hands through the air in an attempt to emphasize his point. As a student of this prestigious institution, you should not act like such a delinquent. The blonde kid rolled his eyes. If you want to talk to somebody about respect, go bother the sleeping guy. What sleeping dash? Ida glanced over to where the blonde was pointing. Ida did a double take. The class went quiet. They all stared at the sleeping bag in the corner. The sleeping bag stood up. The man inside looked over the class. The class stared at the man. The man yawned. Nothing happened. A few of the students shifted uncomfortably. Some looked like they were about to say something. Get on your gym uniforms and meet me on training field B. You have 15 minutes, the man said. The invisible girl's sleeve rose up and she asked, Who are you? Your teacher, the man replied. Unzipping the sleeping bag, the man stepped out and walked to the door. Get moving. Kyoka Jiro had a unique relationship with music and sound. Partially this was due to her quirk. She could hear things that others could not. Partially this was due to her upbringing. Her entire family had a deep love of music, and throughout her childhood, she was immersed in that love. Sound was important to her. Something had been bothering her this morning. She kept hearing a noise. Maybe. It was faint and inconsistent. She could only hear it sometimes, and she was not sure why. It was not a buzz or a ring, but something different. Something from a long way away. She barely paid attention to the teacher as he began to tell them about the physical evaluation they would be doing. Midoriya, the teacher said, pointing to one of Jiro's classmates that she could not see. You got the most points in the entrance exam. I did, the boy asked. A moment of silence passed. Yes. You did, the teacher said. He pointed to a circle on the ground. Go stand inside the circle. How far were you able to throw a ball in middle school? I do not know, replied Midoriya as he walked to the circle. I never threw one. The moment Midoriya entered Jiro's line of sight, the noise came back. Aizawa threw the ball at Midoriya. After a bit of fumbling, the boy caught it. Try it now using your quirk. Midoriya looked at the teacher questioning, My quirk? Give it everything you've got. You have to stay inside the circle, but other than that, anything goes, Aizawa replied. Seeing the boy was about to ask another question, the teacher added, Just your feet have to be in the circle and don't touch the ground outside of it. Okay, Midoriya nodded his head in understanding. Midoriya stood there. He waited. The sound was slowly becoming clearer to Jiro. Every moment it became more defined. It was music. Strange music. It was not rock and roll, or classical, or any style of music she ever heard before. It was unlike anything Jiro had ever heard before. It was something unique. Hurry up, Aizawa said. You're wasting our time. Shut up. He's gaining mass, Bakugo said. He deliberately looked at Ida and scoffed. Didn't even learn about the students he's teaching, so much for the staff of this prestigious institution. Everyone turned to look at the explosive boy. Everyone except Jiro. Her gaze was firmly locked onto Midoriya. Nothing could make her look away. Bakugo looked around and snarled. The worm has the ability to adjust his weight. The heavier he gets, the stronger he gets. How does that dash? One of the students began to ask. Had to open my mouth, Bakugo muttered to himself before answering. Normally, he's about 500, 600 pounds. No, I do not know how it works. I do not care. No, I do not know how heavy he can get. He broke the scale last time he tried to check. Now shut up. Don't bother me. Midoriya's arm unraveled. There was no other way for Jiro to describe it. He held the ball in a mass of tendrils. Raising it up, Midoriya started to spin it over his head. With each rotation, the tentacles became longer and spin faster. The class moved back as the tendrils grew. With every pass, they grew closer to where the class stood. The wind it produced tugged at their uniforms. Jiro fell to her knees. The song existed. It was beautiful and suffocating and exhilarating and terrifying, and she did not know what to do. It was too much. She knelt there as the song, Midoriya's song, dominated her world. Midoriya released. The ball flew. It disappeared into the sky. For a moment everyone stared, and Jiro knew. The teacher announced the result, and Jiro knew. While her classmates began speaking again, Jiro knew. The boy before her was not merely a human. He was something more. Something greater. Something divine. Mizo Shoji was unsure what to think of what was apparently the class's resident powerhouse. It seemed that in many respects the unsettling boy's quirk was much like Shoji's own, though it seemed much stronger. Shoji could admit to himself that he was somewhat jealous. As the first two students took their place for the 50-meter dash, Midoriya reached under his gym shirt and pulled out a notebook and pen. Flipping to a fresh page, he began writing. Despite himself, Shoji's curiosity forced him to ask, "Where did you get that?" Midoriya did not respond. Shoji, after a moment to remember the other boy's name, tried to grab his attention. "Midoriya. Is there something I can help you with?" Midoriya responded without looking away from the two runners as he continued to write notes. Shoji gestured lamely. "The notebook, where did you get it?" "Office supplies. 1220 Alderaan Avenue," Midoriya answered without hesitation. "No," Shoji felt the need to continue his line of questioning. "I mean, how do you have it now?" "I brought it with me," Midoriya said before freezing. He looked concerned before saying, "Which is normal." He fidgeted and glanced over at Shoji. "It is normal for students to carry notebooks on them while at school." Midoriya nodded almost like he was trying to reassure himself. "This is a perfectly normal thing." Shoji blinked with recognition. That worry over being perceived as abnormal. A constant concern that others would not think of him as human. Shoji could relate to those feelings. Though on reflection Shoji would expect that Midoriya likely had it worse. After all, it was reasonable to assume that if Midoriya's powers were much like a scaled-up version of Shoji's, then people's reactions to those powers would also be scaled up. Ashido handed Midoriya the grip tester. Midoriya carefully looked it over before asking, "How does it work?" Ashido pointed at it and said, "Grab it by the handle and grip it as hard as you can." "Okay," Midoriya said, grabbing the handle. Ashido flinched as a massive crunch filled the air. Most of the grip tester fell to the ground. Midoriya opened his hand, revealing the misshapen, compressed, narrow bar that used to be the grip tester's handle. Midoriya looked back at Ashido and asked, "Now what?" Ashido broke out into laughter. Aizawa sighed. Ignoring the cackling pink student, he scrolled to the correct line on his tablet. He paused. Aizawa had no idea what to put down. After a moment he came to a decision. Izuku Midoriya, grip strength. Yes. That seemed appropriate. He made a note to ask Power Loader how much force it would take to do that. After running them through the tests and ranking them, Aizawa sent his students home. His threat of expulsion fell a bit flat this year, many of the students already being a bit unnerved by the Midoriya child for some reason. Maybe something to do with the boy's quirk. Still, Aizawa felt that he would not need to expel anyone this year. They all had the potential to become fine heroes. A few of them he would have to scare into action, and there were others that he would need to beat some caution into. All of them had plenty of growing to do, but that is what he expected. Aizawa headed to the teacher's office. Bakugo had called him out for not reading up on his students, and that was true. Aizawa preferred to let his students make their own first impressions on him. He tried not to read any of the students' files until after evaluating them himself. Before then he would only watch the footage from the entrance exam to get a general sense of what they could do. Sitting down at his desk, Aizawa pulled out the files. He started with what might be the strangest in the bunch, Midoriya. The file contained surprisingly little. A picture, academic transcripts, and, maybe most importantly, the quirk evaluation. Quirk, Izuku Midoriya. The first part of this section was always hit or miss. While it was not required, it was more or less expected for middle schools to evaluate and keep records of their students' quirks. However, there was no national standard for these evaluations. The level of detail in these records varied between schools. Some schools would only write a sentence or two covering the bare basics, or nothing at all, while others would have dozens of pages worth of information. For example, Aizawa could already see by the size of Yayarosa's file that her quirk evaluation must be at least 50 pages long. For Midoriya the evaluation read, Repent ye sinners, for the end has come. Obviously, someone thought they were funny. No matter, UA had its own team of analysts watch over the entrance exam to make up for it. Flipping to the next page, Aizawa began reading a professional breakdown of the boy's quirk. Izuku Midoriya's quirk. Izuku Midoriya seems to grant him several abilities with little connecting them. Its core appears to be a transformation quirk, though a full transformation has yet to be witnessed. Known abilities are as follows. Transformation. Student has the capacity to transform parts of his body, summon tendrils under his control. Teeth have also been observed to appear. Mass. Student appears to have some control over his mass. It appears that student's other abilities may be linked to this, and will become more powerful when the student has more mass. Strength. Student possesses extreme strength. Upper limits are unknown. Has been shown to be able to tear through steel and concrete with little difficulty. Aura. Others around the student appeared uneasy. Testimonial obtained from those who came in contact with the student report feelings of dread and danger. Controlled tests would be needed to determine the radius and strength of aura, though it likely varies. Vision. Student appeared to know the location of robots regardless of obstacles obscuring them. It is likely that student's vision perceives something other than light. More tests are needed to determine what vision is based on. Eat. Student ate half of the 0-pointer. With one bite. We do not know where it went. WF. Aizawa set down the report. Shouldn't you have already read all of that? Asked Sekijiro-kun, also known as Vlad King, homeroom teacher of Class 1B. I want to see what my students are capable of, replied Aizawa, not be told what people think of them. Ken grunted in acknowledgement. Taking his seat across from his fellow teacher, Ken placed some papers on his desk. Your students have any potential this year? I think so, Aizawa said. Aizawa, Snipe said to get his attention as he entered the room. That Midoriya is in your class, right? Aizawa glanced away from his papers for a moment to indicate that he was listening. Yes. What do you think of him? Aizawa thought for a moment. He seems cheerful and diligent. His quirk is powerful but lacks finesse, Aizawa replied. He came dead last in the 50-meter dash, the long jump, and the repeated side steps. Every other event he ranked in first or second place. That's not really what I meant, Snipe replied. Do you think he could be dangerous? All of my students could be dangerous, Aizawa said with the barest ghost of amusement, given the proper training. Why the interest? Ken asked. Snipe sighed, looking uncomfortable for a moment before answering, I don't trust him. Ken gave Snipe a deadpan look. He's 14, Ken said, firm in the belief that every single 14-year-old ever was not to be trusted. It was Ken's opinion that anyone under the age of 25 was, at best, a naive idiot. Snipe shrugged. He just gives me the creeps. Are you still on about that? Cementos said, walking over to join the conversation. Aizawa did not ask. He knew he was getting an explanation whether he wanted it or not. Cementos turned to Aizawa and pointed a giant thumb at Snipe. Snipe here seems half convinced that this Midoriya kid is some kind of alien here to devour our world or something. Aizawa lifted one eyebrow. Ken snorted. Ya laugh all you like, Snipe said. That kid is unnatural. And I am, replied Cementos. Not for the first time, Aizawa thought about how much more productive he could be if he had an office of his own. Izuku Midoriya sat on the subway traveling home. Although the train car was nearly full, there was an apparent empty ring around the young student. Midoriya did not seem to notice, all of his attention on the little book in his hands. He found the book in his locker. With it was a note written by the principal instructing Midoriya to read it before the next Friday. On the book's cover there was a muscular green humanoid ready to throw an American football, along with the words, Blood Bowl, Core Rule Book. All Might sat in Nizu's office as the principal prepared a cup of coffee. You're going to meet with the first heroics class today, Nizu said, taking a seat across from All Might. I'm guessing that you are feeling quite nervous. All Might scoffed. The idea that a bunch of high school kids could make me nervous is laughable. Yes, and the most laughable part of it, Nizu replied, is that it is true. All Might broke out into laughter. Yes, it really is. He shook his head. It's silly. It's normal. Those kids will be looking to you for guidance, Nizu said. Every teacher is anxious at first. Believe me, it will be fine. The hero let out a sigh and smiled. Thanks. I believe your first class is with 1A, Nizu said. What do you think of them? All Might's fists clenched. He sat silent for a moment before saying, Are you trying to ask me if I think any of them are worthy of one for all? No, Nizu said without hesitation or anger. I'm asking what you think of them. Sorry, All Might said sheepishly. Do you want to talk about that? It's just, All Might said looking down at his hands, it seems like every time I talk to someone who knows about one for all, the only thing they want to talk about is me picking a successor. Everyone's acting like I've got no time left. Their hearts are in the right place, Nizu said before sipping his coffee. I know, but even Night Eye called. He introduced me to a kid he thought was worthy of one for all. The hero paused a moment before continuing. Years of nothing, and that is the first thing he talks to me about. He still just wants me to retire. Mr. Togata, I presume. A solid choice. If you were to ask me right now whom I would recommend to you, it would be him. Nizu was careful not to phrase his next sentence as a direct question. I am curious why you did not choose the young man. It's not entirely rational, All Might sighed. It's just all for one. I beat him, it's over. It's just, All Might trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. We never found the body, Nizu said. He could still be out there. Yeah, and if he is, All Might sighed and shook his head. I can't place that burden on someone else's shoulders. It wouldn't be fair. Togata will be an amazing hero with or without one for all. It wouldn't be right to burden him with that enemy. It isn't his fight. Nizu took another drink before asking, and if all for one really is gone? All Might tensed, readying himself for an argument. Then maybe it's time that one for all goes too. If you think that's for the best, Nizu said with a shrug. All Might blinked in surprise. I didn't expect you to take that so well. Isn't that the reason I'm teaching here? Nizu laughed. In the fight for society, one for all is a useful tool, but that's all it is. Ultimately it is just power, Nizu said. It is hardly irreplaceable. No, I did not invite you to teach at my school so you could simply pass down a quirk. I'm after far more valuable resources. Your dedication. Your sense of justice. Most important of all, your charisma, Nizu continued. I don't care if you pass down the qualities that make you All Might, the number one hero. It is the qualities that make you All Might, the symbol of peace, that I am interested in. Those are what I want you to pass down. All Might sat back and said, I'm not sure I know how to give them that. Teaching is often not as straightforward as we would like, Nizu said. Now let's talk about your first class. We have some very interesting students this year. In the cafeteria of UA, Midoriya sat down next to Bakugo with a tray entirely covered in food. Opening his mouth unnervingly wide, he shoved a large sandwich into his mouth. You must be hungry, Kirishima said, eyeing the staggering amount of food before the other boy. Midoriya swallowed before replying, I'm always hungry. Kirishima leaned over and whispered to Ishido, Where do you think he puts it all? Mina's mind flashed back to the remains of the 0-point robot in the entrance exam, before responding, No idea. Thinking of something to change the subject, Ishido said, Am I crazy or was that lunch rush? That's UA, Kirishima said. All of the teachers and even most of the support staff are active or retired heroes. What about Mr. Aizawa? Ishido said. I don't think I've ever heard of him before. Worm, Bakugo said. What's A's was its hero name, and don't give me any of that, I don't know crap either. Midoriya swallowed. Eraserhead matches all known parameters. With that said, he picked up a plate of rice and dumped it in his mouth. Who is Eraserhead? Ishido asked. He's A's was, Bakugo said as if that answered the question. I think I've read about him. He's an underground hero. I think his quirk does something to suppress other quirks. He looked over to Midoriya, who gave him a thumbs up. Well, whoever he is, I hope he's not this tough on us all year, Kirishima said. The teachers are all hitting us hard. You said it, Ashido agreed. Don't they know that they're supposed to go easy on us for the first few weeks? Bakugo scoffed at that. Don't be ridiculous. If you can't handle the work, then you're wasting your and everyone else's time by being here. Learn or get out of my way. You're right. That's how a man should act. Kirishima brought his fist down on the table, facing these challenges head-on. Say that again after you are literally buried in a mountain of homework, Ashido groaned. Midoriya, what do you think? Midoriya swallowed. It doesn't seem bad, he replied. I'll help you study if you want. He proceeded to stuff another sandwich into his mouth. For a moment, Ashido's eyes flicked to look over Midoriya's shoulder. A girl with purple hair sat a little way off staring at the back of the boy's head. A smile spread across Ashido's face as a plan formed. Yeah, that would be great, she said. You seem to know a lot. Heroics, the class was silent. They had all heard the rumors. He would be teaching this class. The door opened. I am here. A heroic figure stood before them. It was All Might. Half the class began talking in excitement. The other half was silent in complete awe. All Might. The All Might was their teacher. Ashido was stoked. When All Might said they would be doing combat exercises, she was excited. Learning that they would be doing so in their new hero costumes almost made Ashido explode. As the girls walked to their locker room, Ashido was literally skipping until that purple-haired girl caught her eye. Quickly she looked around, confirming that none of the guys were with them. Sidling up to the girl, Ashido said, I saw you eyeing up my boy Midoriya today. Jiro blinked. What? Midoriya? Ashido said, short. Green hair. Probably could throw a bus. The boy you definitely have a crush on. Stop me when this sounds familiar. Are you serious? Yaoyorozu said. You want to talk about boys now? Well, yeah, Ashido said. There's a young maiden with a pining heart here. Her soul mesmerized by a boy's strength and stoic demeanor. A romance is ready to bloom. This is my jam. Momo shook her head and muttered, so much for the Bechdel test. Crush. Jiro did not have a crush. At least, she did not think she had a crush. This awe and wonder she felt was not like a crush. She did not want to date or have some kind of romance with Midoriya. Jiro wanted to write songs about him. She wanted to record his teachings. Maybe she even wanted to worship him. Jiro blushed. Jiro trailed off. There was no way she could tell her classmates that. Even in her head, it sounded weird at best or even insane. Ashido's hand came up and pointed directly at Jiro's blushing face. Your feelings betray you, the pink girl said triumphantly. It's not like that, Jiro said weakly. Course it's not, Ashido replied with a devilish little smile. But if it were ever to be like that, know that I could totally put in a good word for you. Jiro was relieved when the group finally reached the locker room, and Ashido was distracted with her hero costume. In the boys' locker room, Izuku opened his package. Izuku looked at its contents and said, I do not know what this is. Despite being one of the first to change into her costume, Ashido was one of the last girls to leave the locker room. She just looked so cool. Ashido had to spend some time admiring how stylish she looked. When she left the locker room, she was excited to see how awesome everyone's costumes were. She saw Midoriya and stopped. Ashido had not really thought of what her new friend's hero costume would be like. If she had given it any thought, she would have guessed that Midoriya would have a somber, practical costume. The boy did not seem to have much of a flair for the dramatic. On the other hand, he could have gone for a cute costume to try and offset the unnerving effect of his quirk. Whatever she would have pictured, it would not have been what was standing before her. There was a lot of leather. Skin-tight, black leather pants clung to his legs. An equally tight, dark purple crop top with a symbolic representation of a kraken covered his chest. Midoriya's stomach was covered only by a layer of fishnet. His right arm was bare, but the left arm had more than a dozen belts wrapped around it, forming an impractical sleeve. There were no shoes. The finishing touch was a simple black domino mask. It was a costume that took confidence to pull off. It complemented Midoriya's slim build and pale skin. With the proper amount of swagger, it would make Midoriya look CC and dangerous. That was unfortunate because Midoriya did not have the proper amount of swagger. Midoriya did not have any amount of swagger. Midoriya was in fact swaggerless. On Midoriya it did not look like the trendy unique costume of an aspiring hero. It looked like someone loaded a cannon full of trendy unique clothes and fired it at Midoriya before calling it a day. It was an abomination to all things fashion. You look, Ashido struggled to think of anything positive to say, dressed? I guess, Midoriya said with some obvious confusion. Didn't they follow your design? Ashido asked. Midoriya wordlessly handed the acidic girl a few pages stapled together. On the first page, there was a crude drawing of a human with spiky green hair wearing only a pair of black shorts. There was an arrow pointing to the shorts which helpfully labeled them as shorts. The second page was a typed letter. To Izuku Midoriya. Regarding your submitted design, no. Your costume designing privileges have been revoked on account of a complete lack of style. From this point forward, costumes will be assigned to you until either you no longer attend UA, or a panel of teachers have judged your sense of style adequate. This first design was submitted by midnight. Future costume designs can be submitted for approval through the Midoriya box in Classroom 1H. Sincerely, the UA staff and public relations team. It was signed by Midnight, Powerloader, Hound Dog, and Present Mike. The third paper had a cartoonish doodle of what could be a mouse, a dog, or a bear, and the message, "I do apologize for this. I am afraid they were quite insistent." Ashido looked back to the leather-clad Midoriya. He looked her dead in the eye and said, "I do not understand." A sense of purpose filled Ashido. "On my honor as a mall rat and fashion diva," Ashido said as she placed a steady, reassuring hand on Midoriya's shoulder, "I will teach you the ways of hip and make you so styling." Bakugo was there to ruin such a moment of camaraderie. "Good luck with that," he said. Bakugo's costume had large white gauntlets around his forearms shaped like rocket engines. He wore gray fatigues with heavy combat boots and a white tank top. His eyes were covered by a semi-transparent visor. Altogether it gave the impression of an ace fighter pilot. Standing behind Bakugo, the guy with the weird elbows, Siro asked, "What does PO stand for?" Bakugo turned, revealing to Ashido the stylized letters, PO, on his back. "Post office," he said, with a completely flat tone. Taken aback, Siro said, "Really?" "No." The students' chatter was all cut short by a cry of, "All right." A blur streaked down from the sky to land before them. Suddenly, All Might stood before them wearing a brilliant smile. He looked over the class and said, "Now you're looking like some real heroes." All Might spent a few moments looking over the class before explaining the rules. You all will be divided into teams of heroes and villains for a series of 2-on-2 indoor battles. The villains will be given a few minutes to hide a weapon before the match. If the heroes get the weapon, they win. If the villains hold off or defeat the heroes, then they win. Time is limited, and teams will be decided at random. Any questions? Why can't the heroes win by defeating the villains? Ojiro, the boy with the tail, asked. And leave the weapon unattended? Who knows what could happen then, All Might said. Capturing the villains would be a fine first step, but the hero's goal needs to be to resolve the current crisis. Uraraka asked, "What do you mean by defeat?" Fighters can be defeated by knockout, surrender, removal from the battlefield, or capture, All Might said. Also, I will be watching the match, and if I say you're defeated, then you are. No arguments. How will the matchups be determined? Azui questioned. Simple. All Might said, gesturing to the board beside him. Match 1 will have Team A as the heroes and Team B as the villains. Match 2 will be Team C versus Team D, and so on. There were no other relevant questions, so All Might had the class line up to get the teams assigned. Each person would grab a ball with a letter on it out of the box All Might held. The hero would then write the student's name on a whiteboard to keep track of who would be in what match. Ashido ended up being almost the last person in line and was jittering with impatience the whole while. When it was finally her turn, she was not really hoping for anything in particular. Looking down at the ball, Ashido saw that she would be on Team C. She showed it to All Might before going back to the group. Team C. That meant she would be in the second match. Good, she would hate to be waiting for hours before her fight. She was pumped. Midoriya asked her what team she was on. C. What about you? Mina asked her friend. Team D, Midoriya said casually, seemingly unconcerned with, or unaware of what that meant. Mina nodded. She was a little disappointed that she was not teamed up with her friend but thought that it was likely for the best. Whoever was paired with Midoriya would have an easy time of it. The green-haired juggernaut would probably tear through whatever team was unfortunate enough to be selected to oppose him. Mina wanted to win with her own power. Idly, she wondered who would be facing him. He was part of Team D, which meant he would be fighting Team C. Mina's train of thought metaphorically hit a giant tentacle monster. She was on Team C. Looking over to the whiteboard, Mina paled as All Might had written, Match 2. Heroes: Tenya Ida and Mina Ishido. Villains: Koji Koda and Izuku Midoriya. Tenya Ida had to admit to himself that he was nervous. The rest of the class was taken to a room filled with screens as the first two teams prepared. His mind kept wandering to thoughts on his upcoming match. Ida wanted to focus on the first match. Not only did his classmates deserve his attention, but it was crucial for Ida to learn from their tactics and mistakes. Only by taking every opportunity to grow would Ida be able to live up to his brother's example. This match was worth paying attention to. Heroes: Jiro and Bakugo versus villains: Siro and Sato. The moment it started, Jiro, for lack of a better way to describe it, plugged her ears into the wall. After a moment she said a few words to her teammate. The rude boy took off like a rocket, leaving Jiro in the dust. Bakugo's feet barely touched the ground as he used his explosive quirk to navigate the hallways of the test building. His opponents, Siro and Sato, tried to ambush him, but they were not prepared for the explosive boy's speed and power. Bakugo blew past all resistance and secured the weapon, ending the match in less than 40 seconds. Ida had a hard time listening to the after-action analysis of the match. He thought he would have more time. Time to strategize about his upcoming match. A match against one of the strongest quirks he had ever seen. Koji Koda had to admit to himself that he was nervous. He and Midoriya were standing in the test building. Koda knew his quirk was not suited for this environment. The one thing these fake cities did not account for was the animals. In a real city, there would be rats and birds, but there were no animals here for him to work with. He was useless. Then there was his partner, Midoriya. Koda was not sure whether he was happy or not that he was teamed up with the shorter team. On the one hand, Midoriya was obviously one of the strongest people in the class. On the other hand, Koda was at least mildly terrified of him. Most creatures avoided the green-haired boy. Flies would not go near him. Rats fled without even seeing Midoriya. Birds would alter their flight to avoid flying over him. It seemed all animals knew to fear Midoriya on an instinctual level. Koda could feel it. Midoriya squinted at one of the maps, marked with the weapon's location, that they were given as the villain team. He pointed up and said, "The weapon is on the 3rd floor." Shaken out of his thoughts, Koda started to look over his map for the stairs. "The upper stories won't be able to hold my weight," Midoriya noted. "You should guard the weapon. I'll meet them here." Without thinking, Koda asked in sign language, "Won't that put us at a disadvantage if they stick together?" "Don't worry," Midoriya replied. "I will protect you." Koda was surprised. "You know sign language?" he asked. Midoriya looked the other boy dead in the eye. Without a hint of sarcasm, he said, "No." Koji did not know how to react to that. Mina Ishido did not have to admit to herself that she was nervous. Ishido knew that she was panicking. Her panic was justified. She was going to fight Izu wall-smashing Midoriya. The boy was a walking earthquake. He ate a robot the size of a house. He could crush steel with his bare hands and take a grenade to the face without flinching. Ishido had no idea how she was supposed to fight that. She was completely screwed. Outside the test building, Ishido and Ida stood before the front door. They waited for the signal. Through their earpieces, they heard All Might announce the start of the match. Ishido swallowed and reached for the door handle. There was a muffled crash. It was only because she was so on edge that Ishido reacted. "Down!" she shouted as she ducked. Ida, the team player that he was, did not hesitate in following his partner's instructions. A dark green, almost black, tentacle burst through the wall. It swept over the heads of Team C, cutting the door in two before slithering back inside. There was no time to think. Ashido rolled forward. It was only as the bottom half of the door swung open did her conscious mind realize that the door's latch had been destroyed by Midoriya's initial attack. She rolled onto her feet into a run, Ida close on her heels. Left, Ida barked out, a few seconds into their run. Ashido moved. Another tentacle crashed through the walls, barely missing the two heroes in training. They needed to keep moving. As the two ran through the building, Ida began to see a pattern. Several times. They reached an intersection. Midoriya's attack would cut off one of their options. "Stop!" Ida shouted, sliding to a halt. "We're being herded." It took Ashido a few seconds to stop and scramble back to her teammate. "What are you talking about?" "If we just keep moving, we'll never find the weapon," Ida said. "We need a plan." "If you have any suggestions, right?" Ashido said, cutting herself off when she hears the telltale sound of tentacles crashing through walls. The two threw themselves to the side before Ashido continued, "I'd love to hear them. It will either be on one of the upper floors or—" Ida trailed off. With him, Ashido finished the thought. "We're going to have to split up. One searches the upper floors while the other tries to deal with Midoriya. If we do, one of us might have to fight both of them at once," Ida said. Both of the teenagers looked at the wall. "Dodge," they said in unison. Both moved before another of the tentacles crashed through the barrier before disappearing back where it came. Gesturing to the hole, Ashido asked, "Do you really think that would matter?" "Point," Ida conceded. "Right?" Ashido shuddered. Ida was faster, which made her task obvious. "Get to the stairs." "I'll try to go for." She paused for a moment to steel herself. "I'll head towards Midoriya." Ida frowned. He did not like it, but he knew it was the right call. "Good luck." Ashido went right. Ida went left. They were off. Ashido did not make good time on her run through the building, always listening for the crash of a tentacle breaking through walls. Part of her wondered how much of this the building could take before it collapsed. Like she did not have enough to worry about without the building falling on her head. It was a big building. Ashido tried to go towards where the tentacles were attacking from. Eventually, she found a large room in the center of the first floor. He was there. "Hi Ashido," Midoriya said with a smile. "How are you doing?" "Oh, you know," Ashido replied. Her eyes darted around the room. "Surviving." She did not see the weapon here. That meant the weapon was likely upstairs with Midoriya's partner. Midoriya nodded. "That's good," he said. "Unless Midoriya hid it nearby." Ashido immediately dismissed that possibility. She thought that she should tell Ida the weapon was not here. Midoriya looked up. His arm morphed and crashed through the ceiling. Ashido yelled, "Dodge!" Ida was well aware of the time limit. 3 floors were a lot to search for one man. If Ida could go full speed, he was confident that he would be able to find the weapon in time. The problem was if he did go all out, then he would not be able to hear Midoriya's attacks. He had to run slower. Keep on his toes. His partner's voice came through his earpiece with perfect clarity. "Dodge!" Ida swerved to the side. A tentacle crashed through the ground where he would have been. "Thank you," Ida said. "Can you do that consistently?" There was a noticeable pause before Ashido replied, "Yes." "Please do so," Ida responded. He began to run faster. Midoriya pulled his arm back. He glanced at Ashido before striking through the ceiling again. "Dodge!" Midoriya looked at Ashido with that friendly smile. "I guess we need to fight now." Ashido swallowed. Forcing a friendly smile onto her face, she replied, "Seems like the thing to do." Midoriya swung. Ashido dropped. She felt the tentacle pass through her hair. For a half-second, Midoriya reformed his arm before striking out again. Ashido rolled to the side. As the tentacle whipped past, Ashido flung a splash of acid from her hand. Pulling back the tentacle, it again reformed into an arm. Midoriya looked down at his clearly undamaged hand. Looking back up, he said, "Ow." Ashido did not believe him. Ashido knew what she had to do. She had to think. Strategize. It was not her specialty, but Ashido could not see any other option. Ashido looked at Midoriya. There had to be some weakness she could use, or she had already lost. That outfit really did look ridiculous on him. Ashido had no idea what Midnight had been thinking. It took a level of confidence in your own skin to pull off a crop top. Midoriya just did not have that. Then there was that sleeve of belts. Ashido's eyes widened. She saw her chance. Midoriya attacked. Ashido dodged to Midoriya's left. Ida moved like a blur, ducking into each room as he systematically made his way through the building. Ida was thankful that the building was barely furnished and no one had seen fit to add doors to any of the interior rooms. He calculated that if he kept up this pace he should be able to cover most of the building before time ran out. Again and again Ashido dodged, always moving to Midoriya's left side. It was that abomination of a costume that gave her a chance. With his left arm bound he could only use his right arm to attack. It was a stupid oversight by the costume's designer that gave Ashido a chance to survive. When this was all done, Ashido was unsure whether she would kiss Midnight or punch her. Ashido did not need to beat Midoriya, she just needed to survive him. Dodge until Ida found the weapon. Maybe she could do this. Midoriya scowled. The thick leather belts covering his left arm bulged and snapped. Ashido whimpered. The sudden onrush of tentacles formed from Midoriya's left arm wrapped around Ashido, pinning her arms to her sides. As Ashido was lifted before Midoriya, the most ridiculous thought flashed through the pink girl's mind. With a strained smile, Ashido said, "I've seen enough hentai to know where this is going." In the command center where the rest of the class watched, Minoru Mineta punched the air and cheered. A tentacle covered Ashido's mouth. For a panic-filled second Ashido thought, "I wasn't serious." Midoriya looked up. Tentacles from his right arm shot through the ceiling. Muffled, Ashido tried to warn Ida. Through her earpiece, Ashido heard a crash and Ida grunt in pain. Ashido was not out of this fight yet. Slippery liquid erupted from her body. With a twist, her body slipped out of Midoriya's grip. She landed on her back with a thud. It hurt, but she still needed to move. Desperately, she kicked the ground, sending herself sliding across the room. Midoriya smiled. "That was good," he said. He almost looked embarrassed. "I guess I'm going to have to do more than grab you." Getting back on her feet, Ashido shrugged, trying to act nonchalant, but her hands were shaking. "Guess so," she said without stuttering. Midoriya attacked. Ashido danced. Ida knew that there must be quite a bruise forming on his left side where the tentacle had hit him. It made running hurt, but he did not have the time to slow down. He did not have time to wonder why Ashido could not warn him about that attack. Ida had to stay focused on finding the weapon and trust that Ashido could handle it. Ida turned his head to look into another room and only saw white. It took a split second for his mind to make sense of what his eyes were telling him. There was something, probably a desk, pushed against the door frame. A barricade. Ida had found his target. Ida slid to a stop. "Dodge," Ashido yelled. Darting to the side, Ida narrowly avoided another tentacle. Running a few steps, he jumped and slammed his full weight against the barricade. On the other side, Koda was pushed back for a moment before bracing himself against the desk a second time. Again Ida pushed. Again Koda held. Again Ida pushed. Again Koda held. Ashido was running out of steam. Sweat covered her body. Her muscles screamed at her to just die and let them rest. Ashido did not care. She would not give up. Midoriya was not smiling. More tentacles lashed out at the pink girl. She ducked, rolled, jumped, and dove to the ground, but was not quite fast enough to keep the final strike from grazing her shoulder. Ashido winced as another bruise began to form, adding to the dozen she had gained already. Midoriya's expression became a little tighter. Bouncing back to her feet, Ashido gave the boy a smile. She ignored the pain and did her best to project a sense of confidence that she did not have. Midoriya nodded and began his next attack. Ashido moved. A tentacle cut through a wall, sending chunks of debris everywhere. It was something that had happened dozens of times in this fight, but something was off. This time something was wrong. The building shook harder. The ceiling began to move. Ashido went pale as she realized. The building was collapsing. From the command center, the students of 1A gasped. From the many camera angles shown to them, They could see the building shaking. They could see what was going to happen. They were horrified. Then a miracle happened. Nothing. Azui, the frog-like girl, noticed an absence and asked, "Where's All Might?" This test was perfectly safe because he was there. All Might's keen eyes noticed the signs of structural collapse before anyone else. Even from the command center, he knew that he could grab the 4 kids before the building fell. All Might was outside the test building before any of his students noticed he was gone. He was about to enter the building when All Might stopped. Ashido screamed. She was filled with mind-numbing terror. She knew that this was her last moment alive. Then a moment passed. Another moment passed. Ashido wondered why she was not dead. At this point, she should be crushed under 1,000 pounds of concrete and steel. Ashido supposed that she should open her eyes if she wanted to find out. Slowly opening her eyes, Ashido saw a pillar of tentacles for a moment before it twisted together. Izuku Midoriya stood there, his costume in tatters, one tentacle armed raised holding the building over his head. Turning his head to face Ashido, Midoriya said, "Sorry." After another moment, he added, "My bad." Looking up again, Midoriya prepared another attack. "Dodge!" Ashido screamed as Midoriya's free arm shot through the ceiling once again. The building shook. The floor tilted. Ida slid across the unstable floor. Koda lost his balance, fell to the floor, and the desk clattered down next to him. It was only a moment before the shaking stopped. The floor became level once again. Ida did not know what had just happened. It did not matter. Ida knew this was his chance. His only chance. Before Koda could stand, Ida's engines roared to life. Kicking off the door frame, Ida jumped over Koda's body and entered the room. Ida saw it. The weapon. The goal. He just needed to touch it. Dodge. Ida kicked off the ground, twisting his body to the left. It wasted precious moments, but he had complete faith in his teammate. Another one of Midoriya's tentacles broke through the ground in the exact spot Ida would have been if not for his partner's warning. His foot hit the ground, and Ida ignited his engines once more. He poured everything he had into one final burst of speed. He only had moments. Ida reached out. The buzzer signaling the end of the match rang. Outside, the symbol of peace watched the final moments of the match on a tablet. He rewound the feed for a few seconds to watch that final moment in slow motion. It was less than 0.03 of a second difference that decided the match. He smiled. Holding his microphone to his mouth, All Might called the match. Hero Team wins. The morning after the battle trials, Eraserhead stood before Class 1A in their homeroom. He yawned. He looked down at the sheet of paper in his hand. He resisted the urge to roll his eyes. This class PRD could have been used to teach these brats something useful. He could have been lecturing them on law, tactics, or procedures. Instead, this valuable class time was going to be wasted on this trivial inanity. Eraserhead would not have bothered, except this is one of the few pointless exercises that Nizu had put his foot down on. "Today, we're going to select a class president," Eraserhead announced. "I don't care how it's decided, as long as it's done by the end of the PRD. Understand? Good." Eraserhead lay down in his sleeping bag behind his desk without waiting for the class to indicate their understanding. Almost immediately, Tenya Ida and Momo Yaoyorozu called for and organized an election. As the class murmured to each other, Midoriya turned to his left towards Bakugo. "What is a class president?" Eyes closed, leaning back in his chair, Bakugo said, "The idiot that has to organize and represent these losers." "Should I dash?" "No." "Do you want dash?" "Hell no." Midoriya nodded. Turning to look behind him, he faced his other friend in class. At least, Midoriya thought they were friends. People are very confusing, but he was fairly sure that they were friends. "Ashido, do you want to be class president?" "What? I mean," Mina fumbled her pencil, almost dropping it in her shock. "Yes. Of course you. That would be awesome." "Good," Midoriya said with a smile and a nod. "I will vote for you." Bakugo shrugged. "Sure," he said as he wrote Mina's name on a sheet of paper. "She'll do." Before the end of the PRD, in an unparalleled landslide of 3 votes, Mina Ashido won the election for class president. She was gracious in victory, only doing a modest 37-second victory dance on Eraserhead's desk. Momo Yaoyorozu, a far more organized, efficient, sensible, and qualified individual, came in second. She sighed. There was some disturbance during lunch. A lot of people were running around panicking. Izuku was not paying attention. He had his lunch to eat. He was very hungry after all. He was always hungry. After that confusion, as the class of 1A prepared to learn mathematics from the hero ectoplasm, Cementos entered the classroom. Midoriya Izuku, he said, facing the student in question, please follow me. Midoriya grabbed his bag and followed the teacher out of the classroom before anyone could question where he was going. How are you settling in? Cementos asked as the two walked down the hall. Is anyone picking on you? Midoriya said before thinking for a moment, don't think so? Other people had asked him this same question in the past, but he was never sure what they meant. Okay, Cementos replied. Stopping before a closed door, the hero placed a hand on Midoriya's shoulder. Kids your age can often be insensitive to people who are different. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, you can always come to me for help. After a beat, Midoriya smiled up at the concrete man with a mouth that was filled with far too many teeth. Thank you, sir, he said, understanding that he was receiving a gesture of kindness. A seasoned veteran of many battles, Cementos did not flinch at the inhuman mouth full of fangs. He was slightly ashamed of himself that it took a slight effort to show the boy that basic kindness. It's not a problem. You're a good kid. Opening the door, Cementos gestured for Midoriya to go inside. Thank you, Cementos. Mr. Midoriya, please sit down, Nizu said as he placed a tray of painted, plastic miniatures on his desk. Did you read the rulebook I left for you? Yes, Midoriya said as he sat down. He looked over the desk covered by a game board designed to look like an American football field. Good, Nizu said. While we will not play Blood Bowl during each of our meetings, this semester we will be playing enough games for a season. Midoriya nods. Nizu slid one of the trays toward Midoriya. It was full of little green plastic figures. You will be playing in Orc Team, the principal said. Some people say they are merely a bashing team that can only know victory through violence. I hope that you will find that there is more to them than that and find an elegance to their play style. Handing the student a piece of paper, Nizu continued, I have taken the liberty of drafting you a good starting roster. Is that all right? Midoriya said it was fine, and the two rolled off to determine who would receive the first kickoff. Midoriya won. As Nizu began setting up his team of humans on the board, he said, I watched the recording of your practical. Izuku hesitated before replying, I see. You could have done much better, Nizu continued. The two sat in silence for a moment as the principal finished setting up his pieces. Izuku said as he quickly placed his orcs onto the field, did not want to scare anyone. Nizu nodded. Understandable. I doubt many humans would do well with your aura. Calling on more power at this time would likely be detrimental to the bonds of friendship you are forming. Smiling at Midoriya, Nizu continued, I do not mind that you held back. It does not matter that you lost. The question you must always ask yourself is, how could you have done better? Midoriya does not speak as he ponders the question. Eventually, he said, I could have created barricades of rubble. He started his turn by performing a block, rolling a POW to knock down one of Nizu's players. That is a fine idea, Nizu said with a clap of delight. One that only took you a moment to think up, so now ask yourself why you did not think of that during the test. Midoriya started to say something before he realized he did not have an answer and trailing off. You were too focused on holding back, Nizu stated. You were so focused on not using your strength that you never considered the best way to use the level of power you allowed yourself. I see, Midoriya said as he rolled to break armor. Succeeding, he then made an injury roll, resulting in a KO. Nizu holds his KO'd player up and examines it for a moment. Humans are such fragile creatures. In mind and body, some will break so easily. Another beat passed before Nizu placed the figure in his knocked-out box, but others will endure terrible hardships with grace. From the outside, it can sometimes seem unbelievable that they all are from the same species. The two continued to play. Tell me, young Midoriya, Nizu said with a smile. What does it mean to be human? Midoriya paused. After a moment of thought, he said, I don't understand the question. That is all right, Nizu said with a smile. What I mean is, what is it about humans that makes them unique? Out of all the creatures and monsters in this world, what makes humans special? After another moment of thought, Midoriya replies, I do not know. Nizu nods. That is expected, he said. It is far too easy for those looking in, such as you or I, to not understand. Likewise, it is easy for those within to invent answers without considering the whole picture. I want you to find the answer to this question. Try to ask someone this question once a day, and think about how they reply. Do you know the answer? Yes, Nizu replied. I could tell you, but then you would merely know it and not fully grok it. Looking down at the board, Nizu started moving his team. Once you do that, once you truly understand, I suspect that you will be unstoppable. Midoriya looks down in thought. Regardless, Nizu said, let us discuss other ways you may have done better during your recent practical. Late Saturday morning, Izuka Midoriya stepped outside his home. There was an explosion. It was not his fault. A small group of cackling men and women in dark robes, which would likely come across as sinister if it were not broad daylight, stood across the street. Standing between Midoriya and the group was a dragon. The towering beast looked down upon the robed group with indifference. Floating above the dragon was a girl who turned and waved. Hi, Midoriya, she cheerfully greets him. Is that the kid? The dragon asked, not turning away from the group who had begun chanting in an alien language. Midoriya returned the girl's wave with a small bow. Hello, Nijire-chan, Ryukyu. He greets the two. Looking over at the group on the other side of the street, as the air around them began to warp and twist, he asked, Is everything okay? We're fine, the dragon said. Run along. But Midoriya began to say before the dragon cut him off. Do you have a provisional hero license yet? Ryukyu said a moment before a strange distortion flew towards her from the robed group. With a contemptuous swipe of her claws, Ryukyu slapped the unearthly attack into the pavement. Looking down at his feet, Midoriya answered, No. Exactly, the dragon stated. For an instant, Ryukyu glanced at Midoriya and flashed him a smile. Run along. Midoriya nodded and left. Standing at the entrance of one of her favorite shops in this mall, Mina was a woman with a mission. A monumental task was before her. While today marked the first battle of this campaign, she knew it would not be the last. Izuku Midoriya appeared from the crowd. He was wearing a white shirt and jeans. On the shirt, one word was written. That word was shirt. It was written in Comic Sans. Mina steeled her courage. It was worse than she had feared, but she would not falter. On her honor as a true mall rat and the Dance Dance Revolution high score holder of 3 separate arcades, Mina would make Izuku so styling. In this mighty task, she was not alone. Standing by her side was her stalwart ally, fashion diva, cosplayer extraordinaire, and part-time cashier of this store, Kitagawa. As Mina waved Midoriya over, her tall blonde friend blew a bright pink bubble of gum from her mouth. The bubble popped, and Kitagawa gave Mina a flat look and said, You're doomed.